Happy coding.
Hey there, Kevin here with our next video in our series on Intro to Web Dev. In the last video, we just learned about JavaScript libraries. This is kind of a direct follow-up to that. So if you haven't watched that one, go back and watch that one. And okay, welcome back. Hi, this is Kevin from Happy Coding. um, so in this video, we are going to learn about a specific JavaScript library and kind of use that to build on honestly everything that we have been learning so far, from HTML to CSS to JavaScript and now to libraries. So yeah, without further ado, yeah, let's go. So there's lots of JavaScript libraries out there. There are libraries on, I did not come up with an example ahead of time, like JavaScript library for uh, flowers. I don't know. I don't know why that's my example. Um, but sure, here's drawing flowers with JavaScript. And if you wanted to go do that, you could. You could get one for, I don't know, filling out taxes probably, or um, sending emails. Fill in the blank. There is a JavaScript library for it. So with that in mind, there's a bunch of different, I don't know, kinds of coding, and I tried to just come up with random examples for like more business-facing code, more like personal code. And one of the, I don't know, kinds of coding is called creative coding. And this is the type of coding that's not really for like a business. It's not really for a job. Well, maybe if your job is an artist. Um, and this is writing code that does stuff that looks cool, is how I think about it. Um, there are some, like, I don't know, practical examples of this. So things like special effects, like movie effects. If you want to, I don't know, procedurally generate like a forest of a bunch of trees and you don't have a forest near you, you can write code that draws a bunch of trees that all kind of look random, but tree-like. That would be an example of creative coding. And stuff like digital art, of course, is creative coding. Things like VJing. So if you ever been to a concert and there's like that backdrop and it's like kind of trippy animations that go along to the music. Someone wrote code to take like the music, the sound as input and output some, interesting visualizations to the screen. So all of this is creative coding. And the idea is you write code that lets you be creative. And there's a bunch of examples of people who do it, and I strongly recommend looking into these folks. Daniel Schiffman is a personal hero of mine. Zach Lieberman is also very cool. Ben Fry, another hero. Like, I don't know, these folks are really cool. I could shout out a bunch of people. George Profenza is another one. Saskia Frique, a bunch of people. And how do you do that? Well, generally, what you'll do is you'll use a library for creative coding that gives you access to a bunch of functionality that lets you be creative. So lets you get music as input, lets you output visualizations and things like that. So on this Wikipedia page, there's a bunch of examples of different libraries that you can use, and you can see like what language they are in. We've been using JavaScript, so those are interesting. And the one we're going to look at today is p5.js. If I didn't know that this Wikipedia page existed, I could also go to like, I don't know, JavaScript library for creative coding. Hit enter, and a bunch of examples pop up. Here's p5.js, here's pts.js. I've never actually used that, but that might be interesting. Here's awesome creative coding. I don't know what that is, but you could check that out. Here's just JavaScript and creative coding. So a bunch of things you could check out. But we're going to go to p5.js. So p5js.org is their homepage. So I'm going to go there. And sort of like right away, you can see like why I like it. It's just sort of like, I don't know, cool and friendly looking. Um, Here's the thing that they say, like, first sentence is friendly tool for learning to code and making art. Um, Free and open source. It's community based, and I don't know. I really love it. So, but it's at its core, it's a JavaScript library. So because it's a JavaScript library, I'm looking for two things. I'm looking for how do I load it and what do I do with it. So let's see if I can look around. So here's like some examples of cool stuff that I could explore in a bit, but what I'm looking for is how do I load this thing in the first place. So sure, download p5.js. What I'm looking for is either like a file I can download and then upload to my editor, in this case NeoCities, or I'm looking for like just a straight up like a URL. So here's one. This looks like it's what I want, so I'll copy that, and I'm going to go into my my Scratch file. So right now I just have a Scratch file that doesn't do anything. I have basically an empty HTML page. The only thing it does is load script.js, and my script.js file is also empty. There's nothing in it, and it generates this like very boring white page, just nothing in it yet. But I'm going to load the p5.js library exactly how I loaded Sweet Alert in the last video. So I'm going to say script source equals, paste that whole URL in, and then close out my script. Okay, save that. And I can refresh, but I don't expect anything to change. And indeed, nothing changes. Cool. And then what? What do I want to do? Well, in a real world, I would tell you to like go look at their reference, and here it is. Read through this, go to their tutorials, read through these, and like setting up your environment, getting started. These are all like good resources to be able to read through. I will also shout out my own webpage, happycoding.io. I have a bunch of p5.js tutorials on there, but for now, I'm just going to kind of code it because I kind of know ahead of time what functions I have available to me. So I'm going to go back to my editor. I have my index.html file. I've loaded p5.js here, and I'm loading script.js here. So I'm going to go into my script.js file, and I'm going to create a function called setup. And then in this function, I'm going to call a function called create canvas. And I'm going to give it two parameters or arguments, 400, and I'll just stick with 400. And then I'm going to call the background function. And I'm going to give that three numbers, 255, 0, and 0. Sure. And okay, so now in my script.js file, I've defined setup, and I have called create canvas and background. So I'm going to save this, and I'm going to refresh. And ooh, I have a bright red square. And that's because I am calling the create canvas function, which gives me a canvas, an HTML element that I can draw stuff to. And then I call the background function with three numbers, RGB. So I'm saying make it really red, not really green, and not really blue. And it ends up looking like this. I can play around with these numbers. I can say like, what if it's, I don't know, a little green, like half green, and refresh, and turns kind of orange. So this gets at RGB colors, and you might have researched that when you were looking at like CSS colors. But you know, you can just kind of explore, like, what if I add some blue to it? I think it'll just become like light pink is my guess. Yeah, kind of salmon-y. So I can play with that. And I can also do things like, maybe I'll draw a circle. So I'll say circle, and I'll just give it kind of random numbers. Maybe I'll say like 200, 300, and 100. So save that and refresh. And I see a circle that's here, and then I can maybe play around with the number. So what happens if I change this to a 100? Let's see what it does. Refresh. And looks like that moves the circle to the left. So I can kind of guess that this controls maybe like the, I don't know, X position of the circle. So if I move it, if I make it bigger, what's it do? Moves it to the right. Okay, so what about this one? What if I move this one, make that one smaller? Refresh. Okay, maybe that's the the y position, up and down. And this number, let's see, any guesses as to what this number does? Let's make it bigger. I'll hit save and refresh. And sure enough, making that number bigger makes the circle bigger. If I make it really small, if I refresh, then indeed my circle is small. So this gets at the like p5.js coordinate system where 0, 0 is in the upper left. And then as your x gets bigger, your shape moves to the right. And as your y gets bigger, your shape moves down. So if I want it in the middle, I can look at these two numbers. So my whole canvas is 400 by 400 pixels. So if I want my circle in the middle, I can say 200, 200, and maybe I'll make it like 150 with size. So I'll refresh, and now my circle is sort of in the middle. And the beauty of this is like, where are these functions coming from? Where is background? Where is circle? Like what is calling setup in the first place? Like in my index.html file, I don't actually have like body on load equals setup or anything like that. And the answer to all of the above is that it's coming from the p5.js JavaScript library. And that means that I don't really care where the circle function is coming from as long as it draws me a circle. And that is the power of JavaScript libraries. So from here, since we have loaded the JavaScript library, the next question is, what can I do with it? So I just threw a few functions at you, but here's a reference with a bunch more. So we've already seen circle. What if I want to draw like a rectangle? So I can look at this, draws a rectangle, get more information. Here's some examples and different ways to do it. Looks like I can like round the borders. I can round some of the borders. I can make it rotate, weird stuff. And what I'm looking for is like, what is the name of the function and what arguments or parameters does it take? And looks like it takes 1, 2, 3, 4, sort of by default. And yeah, so a rectangle is a four-sided shape defined by X, Y, W, and H. X and Y set the location of its top left. W sets its width, and H sets its height. So I need 4 numbers, and that's what they mean. So now if I go here, I'll draw a rectangle with rect, and I don't know, maybe I'll put it at 100, 150, and then I will give it a couple of like a width and a height. So I'll say like, I don't know, my width will be, I'm running out of numbers. I'll say 200, and my height will be, I don't know, 50. How about that? And so just kind of thinking about the numbers, I expect it to be 100 pixels from the right side, 150 pixels from the top sort of border, and a width of 200 and a height of 50. So it'll be kind of like wide, but not very tall. So let's refresh. And indeed, there it is. And I didn't actually mean to center it, but I think coincidentally the numbers I chose ended up centering it based on like the upper left corner and then the width. So I can move this around. Let's say it was actually like, you know what, I want it a little to the left. So I can move its X parameter over, and now it's a little to the left. Let's say I wanted to move it down. Let's see if I can try to get it like right under the circle. So maybe I'll move this down to, I don't know, 225. I could probably figure it out by looking at the numbers, but it's going to be 200 plus 150 divided by 2, 275 maybe? Yeah, and the reason I got that is 200 and 200 is the center of the circle. 150 is the diameter of the circle. So 200 plus half of 150 is 275. So that's how I got that. But you can also just kind of play around and try to position it yourself. So let's say I wanted to make it a little wider to make this, I don't know, maybe this is like a shelf that the, the circle is on. I don't know. Maybe I'll make it quite a bit wider. So maybe 250-ish. And refresh. And sure, maybe a little wider, 300. Yeah, why not? And whoops, I saved in the wrong window. And this is what it looks like, calling a function by looking it up in the reference and then playing around with the variables. with the parameters. So I could keep calling functions and keep drawing shapes. I could also look at like, hey, how do I change the color of that circle? So I'm going to look for a section on maybe colors or something. So yeah, color looks like that's creating colors maybe. Setting is maybe what I want. I'm looking for specific functions. Um, where's the stuff? Pixels, image. Did I miss it? I might have missed it. Yeah, okay, I'm gonna control F for something. Okay, so it was in setting. So there's a fill function, sets the color used to fill shapes. And there is a stroke function, sets the color used to draw like the outlines of shapes. So sure, let's make my circle. I want to fill with, I don't know, maybe I'll make it blue. So RGB 255, save that and refresh. And okay, now they're both blue. So if I want to change my rectangle to green, maybe, RGB, save that and refresh. Cool. And the way that p5.js works is I kind of think of it as there's a little painter inside my computer and I'm telling it what to do with its brush. So reading it line by line, I say, hey, create a canvas that's this big. So the painter goes and gets a canvas and sets it up. And I say, draw a background of this color. So the painter dips their paintbrush in that color and then draws the whole background. Then I say fill of 00255. So I say, hey, take that paintbrush and dip it in that color and then draw a circle. So it draws that circle filled with this color. If I don't have this second fill and I just draw the rectangle right afterwards, it's the same color because I haven't told the painter to dip its brush in a different color paint. So it ends up being the same color, whatever the last time that they dipped their brush in the paint was. So if I want to change the color between shapes, I have to call the fill function again, which says, hey, go dip your brush in that paint instead. That's how I can get like different colors. I'll also really briefly mention that the order matters. So let me move my rectangle up. So if I refresh, notice that the rectangle is sort of drawn on top of the circle, and that's because my little painter inside my computer first fills their brush with blue, draws a circle, and then fills their brush with green, and then draws a rectangle. So the circle is already there, and so the rectangle is drawn sort of on top of the circle. So depending on what you want to do, the order of your shapes really matters. Okay, so we've got the setup function, and we've got a bunch of functions that we're calling from p5.js, and you could go look in the reference and find more. So if you wanted to draw, I don't know, a triangle or a cube or a sphere or a curve or any of the above, you could go and you could look at how to do that. But I'm going to maybe expand the functionality a little bit because P5 not only gives you functions to call, it calls functions that you define. And we've already sort of seen that with setup. So nothing actually calls setup in my code because P5 is calling setup for you. So I can take advantage of that because there are other functions. So let me change my code a little bit. I don't know, let me define a new function called, let me make this quite a bit bigger, function. I'm going to call this one draw. And okay. And then I'm going to move around a couple of pieces of code. So I'm going to get rid of my rectangle, actually. Maybe I'll keep my rectangle there. Sure, why not? And I'm going to move my circle, though, into draw. And this might not really make sense yet, but I'll explain it in a second. So now I have two functions. I have setup and draw. Setup creates a canvas, draws a background, and then it dips the paintbrush in green and then draws a rectangle. Okay? Draw dips its paintbrush in blue and then draws a circle. So if I hit save and refresh, I see that the circle is drawn sort of on top of the rectangle, and that's because of the order that P5 calls functions is it calls setup once at the very beginning. So this is for stuff that you only want to happen once. So like setting up your initial like canvas, like drawing a background if that's what you want, things like that. And then draw is called 60 times a second. And this is what's called like a draw loop or a render loop, but it means that draw is being called over and over again really quickly. And for what we're doing right now, it doesn't really make a difference because we're just doing the exact same thing every single time we call draw. But let's say we didn't want to do the same thing every single time. Let's say we wanted to, I don't know, like play with user input. So if I scroll through the reference and find something on input, maybe, I haven't actually looked at this reference in a bit, so you can tell like I don't remember where stuff is. Is it in here? No. Um, Interaction? No. Material? No. Camera? No. Shader? No. 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 None of this. Math, I would assume it would be at the top somewhere. Input, maybe. Nope, that's like files and stuff. Oh man, all right, this is getting annoying. All right, events. Okay, that's what it's called, events. So in here, I have a bunch of stuff. So if I'm on a phone, I can get like rotation and stuff, but I'm not. So I'm just looking for, okay, keyboard and mouse. There we go. So I'm looking for this variable, mouse X and mouse Y. So mouse X is a variable that tracks the mouse's horizontal position. Mouse Y is a variable that tracks the mouse's vertical position. And these are variables that the p5 library is giving me. So I can take advantage of that by using them. So instead of drawing a circle at 200, 200 every single time, I'm going to draw a circle at mouse X and mouse Y. And again, I am not worried too much about like, hey, how is that tracked? How does it keep track of that? How does it know? Oh, that's in P5 somewhere. So I'll refresh. And by default, I see that the circle is sort of in the upper left corner, which is 0, 0. So mouse X and mouse Y are 0, 0 by default. But once I start moving my mouse inside my canvas, let's see what happens. And, ooh, that's kind of weird. That's kind of trippy. What I'm seeing is that the circle is sort of following my mouse. And I see that like the previous draws of the circle, the previous like instances of the circle are sticking around. And that is because if I think about what the little artist is doing, in the setup function, which happens one time at the very beginning, I say, hey, artist, create a canvas that's this size, draw this background with that color, draw a rectangle, only do that once. Okay. And then in draw, I say, dip your paintbrush in blue and then draw a circle. I'm never telling it to erase old circles or clear out the background or anything like that. And so that's what I get. I see that my old circles kind of stack. And this is maybe exactly what I want. Maybe I want to be able to like draw circles like this, and that's cool. Um, but if I don't want that, I can change how my code works. I can say maybe I'll move all this code up, and I'll say, okay, in setup, create your canvas, and then in draw, which is called 60 times a second, draw a background, draw a rectangle at like this, hard-coded position, and then draw a circle wherever the mouse is. So if I save that and refresh, okay, again, by default, my mouse is in 0, 0 because I haven't moved it into the canvas yet. But if I do that, now the mouse follows my cursor and I don't see the old circles because of how my code is working. 60 times a second, every single time I draw a background, which draws the entire background. So I'm like basically painting over the entire canvas in orange in this case. Then I am drawing a green rectangle, and then I'm drawing a blue circle wherever the mouse is. So that's my frame. I have a circle. Well, I have a background, a rectangle, and a circle. And then 1/60th of a second later, I call the draw function again, or P5 calls the draw function again. I draw a orange background, so I clear out my old shapes, and then I draw my rectangle again, and I draw my circle again, wherever the mouse is. So 1/60th of a second, I get an update over and over again. And okay, so that is a couple of functions. There's a bunch of others. So let's see if I go back to the reference. Where did that go? I lost it. Let me find it again. Mouse X. So there are other functions. So I see like mouse pressed, mouse dragged, and these are functions, not variables that I can use. So maybe I'll change my code a little bit. So instead of draw, I'm going to change it just a little bit. So I'm going to say function, that's way down the bottom, function mouse pressed. And in this case, P5 will call this function whenever I press the mouse. So let me move some of this around. I'm going to move this back to setup because I only want it to happen once at the very beginning. And then I'm going to move this code that draws a circle into mouse press. And I don't have anything in draw, so 60 times a second I do nothing. I could just remove that entirely, but for now I'll just keep it. So I'm going to hit save and refresh. And okay, by default I have my orange background and my green rectangle. If I move my mouse into the canvas, nothing actually happens. But if I press my mouse, let's see what happens. Click, I get my blue circle. And I can click and click and click. And this is how I can get like sort of interactive with my sort of input output. And every time I press my mouse, I draw a circle. I'm not redrawing my background, so it's, you know, the circles that I draw stick around. And there's a bunch of other functions. I won't go through them all, but just know that the general paradigm is defining a function that P5 calls based on like different browser events or user input events. So lots of those, and I would say like play around with those if that seems fun. Okay, so the next thing I'll talk through is the idea that one of the reasons I like P5 so much is that it's a environment that lets you play around with all of the concepts that we've learned so far. So I'm going to change my code a little bit. I'm going to get rid of my rectangle. Sure, let's go with this. So I'm going to draw a background and then a circle every 60 seconds or every 1/60th of a second. So we're back to this old thing. And you know, this is cool, but let's say I wanted, instead of the circle sort of following my mouse, let's say I wanted it to fall from the top of the screen. How would I do that? Well, we know how to do a bunch of stuff. We know how to create a variable, and we know how to change a variable over time. We saw that with one of the previous projects where we were adding up scores over time. So I can do the same thing. I'm going to create a circle variable here. So I'm going to say let circle y, and I'll set it equal to 0 at first. And then let's see, the only thing I'll do here is mouse X, I'm going to change to 200, and this I'm going to change to circle Y. Okay, so I have circle Y is 0, and then I draw a circle at 200, which is going to be the center, and circle Y, which is going to be 0. So let's refresh. Indeed, I see that. So moving my mouse doesn't change anything anymore. And in this case, circle Y is always 0. So, you know, it's not doing much. But remember, this is called 60 times a second. So if after I have drawn my circle, or before, honestly, it doesn't really matter, but I'm also going to change the value of the circle Y variable. So I'm going to say circle Y, and there's a few ways to do this. I could say circle Y plus 1. So I'm saying at the end of draw, take circle Y and add 1 to it. I can shorten this whole thing to plus plus as well. So we've seen that before with scores. But let's see what happens if I refresh this. And now I see that the circle is moving down over time because I'm increasing my circle Y variable over time. So it starts out at 0. It's going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 60 times a second. So after 1 second, it's down by 60 pixels. 2 seconds, 120, 180, so on and so forth. And this is a, I don't know, fun sort of, I think like welcoming environment to play around with the idea of changing variables over time. But that's not the only thing we learned about. So let's say I wanted to, I don't know, reset it so it starts back up at the top when it reaches the bottom. You know how to do that. That is an if statement. So I'll say if circle y is greater than, in this case, what is it, 400, then I will, what? I will reset the value of my circle y function. Circle y equals 0. So here I'm saying at the end of draw, increase circle y by 1, and if it reaches 400, or if it goes more than 400, then reset it back to the top at 0. So if I refresh this, when it reaches the bottom, it's going to pop back up. And there's there's kind of an artifact here because circles are drawn from the center. When I talk about 400, I'm talking about the center of the circle. So I could modify this a little bit to actually check if it went like entirely off the screen. And same thing with like it starting at 0, it pops back up when it's like half visible because I'm at the center. So sure, maybe instead of 400, I'll say, how big is my circle? 150. So really this would be like 475, but I'll just say 500. Nah, I'll say 475. That's like the exactly correct number. That'll be like when the top of the circle is off the bottom of the screen. Then I want it to be what? Instead of 0, I want it to be like negative 75 because it's off the top of the screen by 75 pixels, which is half of 250, the size of the circle. So I started out at 0, so it does pop out that way when I load it, but now it's going off the entire screen, and then once it wraps around, I don't see half the circle at the top of the screen. It just starts from like, the very bottom of the circle. So I don't know. I kind of like that. But that's the idea. You can use the concepts or practice the concepts that we have learned about in all of the previous weeks. And there are lots of places to do that. So from the P5 reference, I'll also shout out my website, happycoding.io. That's the website we've been using for the HTML tutorials, but there are also p5.js tutorials, and there's a bunch of them because I am a gigantic nerd. So if you're like, how would I draw a pumpkin in p5.js? Well, let's look. It's maybe not the most beautiful pumpkin in the world, but is it loading? Oh, it's going to take a minute to load because this is going really slow, but there will be code here in a second. I should look at why my website has been so slow recently. That's really slow. Oh, I actually see. So actually, if you kind of look in the lower left corner, it says transferring data from toolness.github.io. I am betting that this is actually a JavaScript library that I use in my code that for some reason the JavaScript library is loading really slowly. So I didn't intend for this to be a meta lesson, but this is one thing that you have to be kind of aware of is when you use a JavaScript library, if you're loading it from an external website, it can be a little slow. That's interesting. But anyway, let me just click this button to go to the code directly. This is in the P5 editor. We won't really be using that, but the idea is the same. Here is P5 code, and I'll hit the run button here to look at it. But in this case, I'm drawing a background. I'm drawing like a line. I'm drawing some circles or some ovals in this case. And that's how I'm drawing that pumpkin. And okay, now it loaded. Great. So I can see that in here. It's the same exact code. And so on and so forth. I could look at, I don't know if I wanted to do animation like a ghost, cute little ghost to look like that. I don't know how that's going to show up on the video, but if I load this code, There you go. And I can play around with this. I can like look at how it's working and modify the code myself. And this one gets a little mathy because it's trigonometry, but you know, in the end, it's just code. Um, you know, a bunch of others. If we get into like, here's for loops, for example. So like, I don't know, here's a grid of flowers. Sure, that's kind of cool. I'm not saying they're the prettiest flowers in the world, but you can start to play with it and you can see here it is. It's a for loop inside of another for loop. And if I run it, I get random flowers every time. And I don't know, that's kind of cool. Or at least I nerd out about that stuff. um, and maybe the last thing I'll say is like here's arrays, and there's another aspect to this, like where I'm looking for something specific. Here's images, but what am I looking for? I'm looking for what am I looking for? I'm looking for this one, random. So the idea of randomness is really fun as well. So I'll leave all that as sort of optional. Like if you want to look into that stuff, you can, because now you know how to use the p5.js editor, or the p5.js library, I mean, and that unlocks a lot of functionality. Okay, so the actual last thing I'll talk about is tying all of this back together with HTML and CSS. So what we're doing, what we've done so far is we've kind of looked at this canvas, this p5.js canvas, but in the end, this is still HTML, CSS, JavaScript. P5.js does not contain anything that you could not write yourself. It's JavaScript. It's it's the same stuff we've been looking at, you know, maybe using concepts that we haven't quite covered yet, but in the end, it's HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So I can actually right click this and inspect, and my dumb face is going to be in the way, but here it is. This is a canvas. Canvas is an HTML element, and then there's JavaScript that interacts with the canvas to do things like draw shapes and whatnot. But that means that I can sort of mix and match. So let me go back to my HTML, and in my body, maybe I'm going to have an h1 tag that says like, I don't know, falling circle. And I'll close that out and I'll obsess over white space, and I will save that and refresh. And indeed, there's falling circle. There's my HTML mixing with my canvas here. I'll also add like, I don't know, a p tag that says like, watch the circle fall. Yeah, this is just an example, but you can imagine more interesting stuff. And I'll save that and refresh. And okay, there's my p tag. I'll say by default, p5 will put the canvas sort of at the end. And so let's say I wanted to put it in the middle. I wanted this text to show up like underneath the canvas. Well, I can do that. So I'll say div id equals, I don't know, sketch dash parent, maybe. And right now it's just an empty div. But now that I have that element in my HTML, I can use that element in my JavaScript. So specifically here, I'm going to change a couple things. So here I'm going to like keep around a reference to my canvas. So let canvas equals create canvas, and then I'll call canvas dot parent and sketch dash parent. I think I called it. I don't remember already. Is that what I called it? Sketch dash parent. Yes. And so I'll refresh. And indeed, I see my h1, and then I have my sketch, and then my p tag, because I gave my div an ID, and in this case, the canvas.parent function, or you know whatever variable I name this, takes the ID of an element and says, okay, take this canvas and put it inside that particular element. So if I right click now and inspect and make this a little more visible, I see here's my h1, here's my div with an ID of sketch parent, here's my canvas that p5 is creating for me, and then my div closes and I have a p tag. And so I can, you know, write any HTML I want in there. I can also do things like load my load CSS. So let's see, maybe I'll just add a style tag just for the sake of time. And here, what do I want to do? I want to say style and slash style, and oops, got to spell that right. Style, and maybe I'll give my body a background color. Background color of maybe light orange. I don't know if that's a color. It didn't pop up. So sure, orange. Yeah, let's go with orange. Let's refresh and see what happens. And maybe, where'd my canvas go? Is my canvas gone forever? I am assuming I messed up some kind of syntax. I'm getting an error here. Okay, so I must have, oh, okay, I spelled style wrong. Of course I did. So style, refresh this one now. And ooh, there we go. Okay, so now I have a sort of orange background and a orange sketch, and there we go. Watch the circle fall. I'm very tempted to make this a pumpkin because it's almost Halloween, but I will not do that. But this is the idea of mixing HTML, CSS, JavaScript, calling a JavaScript library to do cool stuff. And from here, it's a matter of finding different things that you can do in P5 and eventually finding different JavaScript libraries that do kind of whatever you want. Okay, so I'll leave it there. From here, we're going to do like a p5.js project, but now you know sort of the next layer of JavaScript libraries, which is getting into like more involved functionality that involves calling like more functions and also mixing in all of the concepts that we already learned. So if I wanted to add, I don't know, an array or use a for loop or add like more and more like if, else if statements, I absolutely could. And that is one of the reasons I love P5 so much. All right, so I'll leave it there. Hopefully this is fun and interesting to you. I know it's fun and interesting for me, but for now, I'll say thanks for watching. And as always, of course, happy creative coding.